Hi everybody, I'm back. It's Jessica from Chambray Blues with my next tutorial about how you can press your quilt squares and get them ready for trimming. There's a couple of ways you can do this. So I had previously stitched my quilt pieces together with the method called chain stitching, which is in my most recent video. You can catch that on YouTube if you missed it. And there's two ways you can press your pieces afterwards. So generally most directions will tell you to press the seams open like this all the way down the middle of each square. However, when you're using a pattern that has a lot of white, you're going to get some discoloration behind that where you can see the seam allowance. And my preference is to instead press the seam allowance toward the darker of the two fabrics. So for this, I'm just going to use my easy press here because it's right on my table and it's really quick to do that. I'm just pressing it to that side, and then my piece will be ready to trim. The reason we have to trim it, as you can see, there's some difference at the edges, and in order to get the pieces to line up perfectly, it has to be perfectly square before we start. So to trim, then I'm going to put it on my mat over here in the corner, line it up with the 0 mark. We're going to have a 4-inch square. We should have a 4-inch square plus seam allowance. So it's really 4 1/4. Sorry, 4 1/2. It's going to be 4 1/2. So you can see that as we sew, those pieces stretch a little bit and they can get to be off just a hair. So we are going to trim that. Got my rotary cutter here and another straight edge, and I'm just going to trim that off. And same here, my piece was just a little bit off. Okay, and now I'm going to do this in the next corner. Here we are. So now my piece is perfectly square. So now I need to go through and do the same thing for all of the pieces in my design. The pattern I'm using for this is by Riley Blake for the Cricut Maker. So all these pieces were cut on the Cricut, and if you missed that tutorial, you can catch that on YouTube as well. The pattern I'm using for the Daisy Days throw quilt is this one here, called Spinning Wheels, and it's got lots of smaller intricate pieces and they need to match exactly. So that's why it's really important that we go through this whole process. Another tip is to write how many of each piece you're going to need for this design. I went through here and counted. There are 16 triangles of the dark blue. There are 36 of the daisy green print, and mark those on your pattern, because once you've got everything sewn, you need to go through and count to make sure you have the right number of squares. It's very easy to get mixed up. The Cricut is very efficient at cutting these fabrics, and you might have extra pieces that you won't use. So make sure that you have the correct amount according to your pattern before you begin. It makes the whole process so much easier. So now go through all of your squares, trim them to size, and press the seam allowances to the darker side of the two fabrics. And then you'll be ready for the next step, which will be putting 4 squares together in a block. And I'll have another tutorial on that. If you need more information, you can find me at chambrayblues.com. Thank you.